Chris Finch of the T-Wolves. By the way, back-to-back playoff appearances in both years as the full-time head coach is now joining us. Well, there you are, Chris Finch. It's great to see you. So let's go and talk Denver for a second. You faced them. You saw them. They've always been tough with altitude. But I said this yesterday. We knew they were good, but I thought Nash's Suns or Katie and Westbrook's Thunder, these young ascending teams, I thought they'd win a title. They didn't. Are you surprised? Because you've watched Denver for years now. Are you surprised they not only got to the finals, but the way in which they did?
Not really, Colin. I mean, they have such an understated amount of talent there. These guys don't get enough respect. And I think the other thing that people don't really give them enough credit for is how well their pieces fit together. Of course, when you have a guy like Jokic who just makes everybody else around him so much better, it's going to accentuate everybody's best attributes, but they just fit together seamlessly, and they seem to be able to move like within a game to different parts of matchups or styles or rhythms at which they play, and depend on what the defense is doing. So they're pretty sophisticated when you start picking them apart.
Yeah. Coaching staff, they haven't had a lot of chaos, a lot of the same guys. You told me last time we had you on, you said Jokic is a handful. We were talking about how the Warriors could match up, and you're like, listen, Draymond stuff, it's not going to work against Jokic. You've watched him develop from a second rounder. When did you know in this league, when did you look at Jokic and go, we're looking at an all-timer potentially here?
Well, I was fortunate enough to be with him on that staff with his second year, which was kind of his breakout year. Never could we have predicted this at that time, but we certainly could see the talent, the IQ, the ability to anticipate what's going to happen on the floor, which is a hallmark of some of the best players ever, and just the winning intangibles. He really doesn't care about numbers, even though he can put up 45 a night if he wanted to. He's wired to pass first. He makes all the right plays. Like that's the thing about a lot of guys, that have immense talent. Sometimes they fight the game, and they fight the game because they're trying to put their stamp on it. But he just moves from part of the game to part of the game and does whatever the game needs. In our series, when we played him big, if we put Rudy on him, he drug us to the top of the floor, and they ran a lot of DHOs and actions with Jamal. And if we put, anyone smaller, they put him in the post and forced us to come and double and choose that way. And he just effortlessly moves around the floor and just makes his team go. And everyone plays so well off of that.
So I want to talk about the Lakers before I pivot over to the Eastern Conference. LeBron, I think it's reasonable to say he can be dominant for a half or in spots. He can be as good as anybody in the league. But you know this. You get to be 38. There's a lot of road trips, a lot of plane trips, a lot of practices. We all get old, right? And so I've argued that where Anthony Davis was the perfect complement 3 or 4 years ago, but now LeBron's down to about 58 games a year, and AD is going to give you about 60, that they need. I'll just throw a Trae Young out. Trae gives you minutes. He's durable for his size. He's 70 games. And I've used Edwards, and I've used your guy. I've said that guy's going to play minutes. He's going to play games. Is that LeBron now needs to be coupled with younger dynamic players. When he's gone, they take the franchise over. When you hear all these rumors about who plays with LeBron, like when you hear a Trae Young thing, is there a certain type of player that you've witnessed generally plays well with LeBron?
Well, I think it's guys that, certainly have the ability to be ready to shoot and do something when they get the ball. I think that's one of the things that made Austin Reeves a good fit for them. He wasn't afraid of playing out there and making tough shots or, shots when the ball swung to him and he's open and making plays out of that situation. We all want more talent. There's no doubt about it. Every team is always trying to add more talent, more pieces, more depth. But it's really about how these guys played well together, and guys that can play off of talented players and aren't afraid of, you might not touch the ball for a number of possessions, but are you able to do something when you get the ball?
Yeah.
Guys like Steve Kerr famously made, game-winning shots playing off of Michael Jordan. And these guys, particularly in the playoffs, have the ball in their hands even more and more and more. And you're right, through 82, they're going to need people to carry the load. but you still have to have somebody who moves really comfortably to a complementary role and can be pretty impactful in that role too.
So I look at Miami, and we always talk about the Heat culture. And I do think culture is underrated in the NBA because you're getting 19 and 20-year-old kids. If the culture's bad, those kids go sideways fast. So the Warriors and the Heat, the Spurs in their dynasty, it was the culture. When you hear Miami Heat culture, as a coach, what do you see with Miami? 7 undrafted players, 4 in the rotation. What makes it work?
Well, I would say this. I was talking to a Heat scout at the combine last week, and they just don't believe there's they believe there's talent everywhere in the draft and outside the draft. So their culture starts there. Their culture starts and it says that we feel like we can find guys who can help us win no matter where they're coming from. They obviously believe mightily in the way that they do things. They're probably the best shape of the league. They develop guys into roles around star players, which is the fastest track to developing young players. Give them pretty tight left-right bumpers. Let them know what you need them to do. They play well off of guys. And ironically, oftentimes when you're getting guys outside the draft or in the late second round, you're getting guys that have been in college for 3 or 4 years.
Yes.
They might be a little bit more mature. They have the connective tissue. They fought through some adversity. They've had to prove who they are, grow into a role, all the things that you want when guys are coming into the league, and guys that you need to help kind of solidify a roster with talent already. And they have that emotional maturity.
Yeah, that's a great point, by the way. A second rounder is more like a college football player. Maybe he redshirts, maybe he doesn't, but he's 22 years old and he's ready to join a Jimmy Butler, can take the hard coaching, the hard teammates. Great point. So in your career, you have been on staffs or coached James Harden, guys that aren't afraid to shoot. You've coached Brandon Ingram. Then you've had lesser players, Jeremy Lin, who, again, offensive-minded. Have you ever had a player like Jayson Tatum, who is a tremendous two-way player, but there are moments, he reminds me a little, personality-wise, of Andrew Wiggins, where sometimes I feel like he needs a little push. It's like, all right, like, take the game over. And I think Tatum's a better two-way player, and I always liked Andrew Wiggins, but I did feel at times he could disappear a little. Not everybody is confrontational. Not everybody's Kobe. What would you do with the Jayson Tatum, who sometimes needs a nudge to take the game over? At least it feels like that to me.
Yeah, I think, what's important to remember of these playoff journeys for all these players is that they, every year they go a little bit further, they learn a little bit more, not only about how the teams are guarding them and the different things that they're seeing, but they also will have opportunity to reflect on their missed opportunities of being aggressive. And I think that's what it comes down to. How do you activate a guy to, whether you call his number more? But again, in the playoffs, sometimes it's very difficult because these guys see multiple bodies, whether it be double teams or multiple guys sitting in their lap. And they want to make the right play because they realize I got to trust my teammates if I'm going to win. So it's a balancing act right here. Maybe you can move them around the floor a little bit. Maybe you try to post them a little bit more. Maybe try to play them off the elbow where it's a little bit harder for them to come with multiple bodies and double right away. I'm not sure that those all different things that you can do to try to play within your system. But I think what we've seen from Tatum, and this is what proves that he's a world-class player, is that when his back has been to the wall in these elimination games, he has showed up big and he has carried them with some of his best games. And maybe it's just the desperation. I think sometimes guys are motivated more out of desperation than they are out of inspiration.
Finally, the T-Wolves, you have a young star in Ant. And then you have a star that in Karl Anthony Towns that on the market, you're not going to move off Ant, but you've got two bigs and you brought in Conley, and there's different parts. And some could argue, there's a little bit of size like the Denver model. They got a young player like the Denver model. How active will you be? Like people would say from the outside, they're not there yet. They're a move away. Your takeaway on doing that, like making too many moves, too big a swing. Where are you at today in Minnesota with that roster?
Yeah, I think we're pretty happy with our core. We never thought that this move to bring in Rudy and go with the double bigs was something that was going to be, a one and done or pay massive dividends right away. We knew it would be more of a move that would help us transform over a number of years. I think with Ant's emergence, it certainly makes us think about, the different things that we could do. But we like our core. It's all about adding the right pieces to it. We were very, very happy bringing in Mike Conley. We thought he was the perfect piece to help kind of bridge the gap between Rudy, Cat, and Ant. We're always going to look to be creative, look to be, in the dialogue of how do we improve this team. Our front office here, led by Tim Connolly and his guys, are very heavy on the scouting piece and know the league extremely well. And I know right now they're going through all the evaluation process, whether it be the draft where we hold the 53rd pick, where maybe we get one of those guys we were talking about earlier, like that type of mature connective tissue that actually makes talented players a little bit better. And then there's obviously trade and free agency, that yet to be played out. But, we feel like we learned enough about what we did this year, even though we had all the injuries and Cat missed 50-some games, that we have a better starting point coming into next season to which to go from and build from. We liked how we kind of finished a little bit when we were healthy. We had a good identity. But again, we're going to be open, but I don't think this is something that we're looking to pivot off anytime soon.
By the way, Victor Wembanyama, one more question. He's going to get his points. He is thin. I've said before, I look at body. I looked at Zion's body in the torque, worried me. I looked at Chet Holmgren's body, worried me. I can remember Sean Bradley couldn't put weight on. Are the concerns about Victor? I've seen bigs. Listen, human beings generally aren't 7'3" or 7'4". What do you think? Would you be concerned? Would you put him on a minutes in game restriction as he adds weight? I said with Chet Holmgren, I would play him 60. I would try to play him at home in comfort. But I don't think he was ready from Gonzaga to 82 games, 8 preseason. I just don't think his body's ready for it. NFL kids come in, they're 24, they've been in the SEC, they've had violent collisions, they're ready to play in the NFL. These bigs, they're like glorified high school players. Like, what is realistic for him early?
Yeah, I think you're very wise in your approach. It has to be measured. There has to be also a building up of some sort of ruggedness through an 82-game season. So you have to let him play, but managing that is going to be important. I think what separates him is his fluidity. He's just moves so well for his size. A lot of times guys that are that size, are trying to figure out, growing into their body, their coordination is a step behind. He has all that. So I don't think we'll see any of the awkwardness or the injuries that may result from that. It's going to be about the weight. He's going to get hit a lot. He's going to get hit first. How does he absorb that? But by all accounts, he's a great kid with an unbelievable work ethic. He's going to put the work in. He's going to be able to work on his body, and I'm sure that's going to be a point of emphasis coming in. I'm excited to see him, though.
Yeah, and he's also played against some older European guys, so it's not kind of your classic college environment in the States domestically. Chris Finch, T-Wolves, great seeing you. It looks like, and I mean this as a compliment, you're getting rest now. You're sleeping. You look healthy. I know that season can beat you up. You look great, and it's good seeing you. Hi, everybody. Thanks for watching. Subscribe here to get the latest from the show. Also, be sure to check out more of the best clips from The Herd or go watch a few segments from other shows on FS1.